Hello. Welcome to the Eddie Conversation Podcast. My name is Eddie V. Hill, and I am your host. This is episode 89, and joining me today is Michi Que Doan.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for being on.
Yeah.
Great. So you are... Okay, I'll say I know you as a first assistant director specifically, mostly. How do you see yourself these days?
No, you're correct. I mostly identify myself as a first assistant director. When I introduce myself, I do say I am a film assistant director for clarification, since other industries do have assistant directors. I know that you know me also as a script supervisor, but nowadays I don't really associate myself with that position anymore since I haven't done it for a couple years. So,
Yeah, right. Okay, great. So we'll get into that a little bit too. I want to jump into origins. I want to jump into what you're pursuing these days. And I want to jump into process and craft stuff too, like how you do your job and things that people don't know about the job, because I know that's a hurdle that we jump over.
it's a job I explain every day.
Yeah. Probably even to your own crew. No, they know what we do, right? They should know.
That's the goal, I hope.
They're like, by the way, you do have to communicate things to me. I should know this. All right, so I don't know where to start. Let's see. I'm trying to. Okay, let's start with the basic, general, easy question, just to lay the foundation for people. The question is, why? Why first? Why assistant directing? How assistant directing? Let's start with that.
Honestly, the real reason as to why I chose assistant directing is because I found that I'm really great at taking other resources and just like bringing it together and informing it to people. And on top of that, the thing that made me click into realizing I wanted to do assistant directing was when, pardon my French, I worked on one too many shit shows where I sat there and I couldn't do anything about it, you know? And most of us working in the film industry are doing it because we love filmmaking. We come into it loving the craft of it. Obviously, some of us fell into it, so we didn't have a choice, and that's just like where we kind of ended up. But for a good chunk of us, a lot of us came in because we loved it. So it sucks coming into a production where production management or the AD team wasn't catering to something safe or something enjoyable for the crew, something running very smoothly, where at the end of the day, even though we had a great product, the people behind camera were just not happy. And I felt like as an assistant director, I'm able to control the tone in which the set moves, the way the set communicates with each other. And it just makes me feel a lot of satisfaction behind ADing, despite the fact that it is a stressful job.
That's great. Yeah, I that is okay. Yeah, because you're watching it go down, and you're like, I could do a better job than what these people are doing. They're not thinking things through how I think they should be doing it. So let me just do this
Yeah.
myself, kind of thing.
Yeah, because like we are the information hub on set. You know, people come to us for information about what's happening. The way that I describe it to people a lot as to why I don't do producing is that the producers are kind of like I don't know the correct military rankings, but like the general in the back. They're like the one who pushes out the resources, you know. I'm like the general in the front. I'm the one who like leads everybody through the battle. With everything. So I'm like there on set helping with all of that going. So I just love being a part of the set life rather than being fully in the office. So
Okay. All right. Great. I do want to okay. Let's take a little bit of a. Let's go even further back in time then to figure out how you found your way to it in the first place, just to lay that foundation down too, because did you? Because I don't even think I'm not even sure if I know this or if I've forgotten this or what the. It's been a bit. Um, how did you find your way into film in the first place? Because I know, like, you started film editing first
Hmm.
and then found your way onto set as a script soup. But I don't know if there's any PAing or if you what schooling you did or even when. I'll just throw a bunch of questions out there, or even when you caught the creative bug in the first place and had movie making as a option at all.
Sure. Um, as you can see, I am Asian American. So, as a child, you would think that my parents often pushed me to be a doctor or a lawyer, etc. But my parents discovered very early on that I was a creative child and they helped nurture that. Like originally, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a writer. My parents were like, okay, cool. And then in high school, I wanted to be a graphics designer until I started playing a bunch of video games. And through one of the video games, I discovered like some sort of emulator where you could take elements of that video game and just like make your own stories out of it. Um, kind of like how like Machinima did with like their games with like Red and Blue. So I did that, made my own like little mini stories, and had my high school friends like do like the voiceover work for it. And that's when I fell into editing and I started working in my high school broadcast class, and from then on, I was like editing, directing. So I did go to film school. I went to Cal State Long Beach for the film editing program. Um, Around that time, Steven Spielberg was giving grants to the school. I didn't see most of it, unfortunately. And I really, really wanted to get into film editing for like movies, but that's unfortunately not where my networking and my journey took me. I fell into mostly digital new media and marketing. I worked for World of Dance before they were bought out by NBC, like back when they were still a startup. I worked for a couple YouTubers, and at some point I was like, this is not really where I wanted to be. So I hit up a couple friends who were in the industry. I restarted working on set as a PA, and I did have some script supervising training from high school from a trained script supervisor, Todd Howard, and that's when I started falling into script supervising alongside ADing at the same time, but mostly as an ADPA. Those journeys happened at the same time, and it was during my script supervising journey that I decided I wanted to do AD. Not because I didn't like script supervising. I love script supervising. I wish I could pursue it more, but my like gut just told me I wanted to do AD much more. So,
Okay, that's a lot there.
yeah.
Great. So, yeah, all right. Yeah, I understand the script supervisor feeling of like you just want to be involved. Like I want to have some power here.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's power or like there a lot of productions don't really listen to their script supervisor. It's harder for the script supervisors to establish a voice in the room. Like it's a lot of work up front to earn the trust of the team. But as an AD, you're kind of like built into the foundational structure of production. So I get I get the that there. But I do want to go back to because you talked about high school and you talked about the editing for like the YouTubers and stuff. So I want to hear a little bit more about the specificities of if there's an. I'm just curious to dig into that a little bit. Like when you're working as the director editor for High School News,
Hmm.
what does that look like? What kind of stuff are you putting together and how? Yeah, how? Yeah, I'm just some stories you cover. Because I did some stuff like in middle school, but I didn't do any high school stuff. So I'm just
Mm.
curious.
Yeah. So I went to Fountain Valley High School, and at Fountain Valley, they have a broadcast program called Barron Banner, not Barron Banner. Barron Banner is the newspaper. Barron Broadcast News. And they mostly did like, standard news coverage for the school, for like sports, general news. But they also kind of like did like little fun sketches on the side. Our competing school, who also had like a little broadcasting going on, was Huntington Beach High School, which had a arts program called APA. I've had a couple friends from Cal State Long Beach who also did programs like that, and most of the time they would cater towards teaching people how to use cameras. At the time, we had Canon DV cameras, so we had like little mini DV tapes at the time. And my time there, we were transitioning slowly to SD cards. So we had the capture deck and everything. Anytime like files were corrupted, you could see through like the gray bars. So if that shows how old I am as a millennial. Obviously, I'm not as old as like some people who deal with like bigger tapes and all that. But yeah, I was in a transitional time between mini DV tapes and SD cards. We They also taught us to produce media from a like production management standpoint. Like, what do we need to shoot? Who do we need to hire? And what is our deadline to get so and so segments out for these weekly episodes that would come out every Wednesday or Friday. They always changed it. And then there's obviously directing. Once in a while, we would have the opportunity to direct a sketch, or we had this annual Halloween like horror story that we would like direct like a feature film or a short film. So it was like little droplets of what working in film or TV broadcast would be like. So
Okay, because this was like an established news, like the whole time you're going. Like I don't know if this is like senior year, junior year,
it
sophomore
could be
year.
any year. You could be a freshman all the way up into a senior year.
Okay,
Obviously, the people who were seniors had, seniority rights over,
sure, but
certain positions. So
literally seniority. Yeah. Okay. So were you a part of it like all the years? Or you just jumped into it like
I jumped in a little late because I didn't discover that I wanted to do film until my sophomore year. So I think I joined either my sophomore or junior year.
Okay.
So I'm a late bloomer.
Yeah. Nice. So yeah, because I don't. I'm thinking about because when I don't know, just talk about me for a second if I may. So when I did the new stuff in middle school, I took like a video editing course
Mhm.
at that point, and that's when I kind of had my first like, oh, it's fun to like clip the video and then clip the video and then watch it play through, and you're like, oh, it feels like a movie, like just how the editing works and learning through that. But I remember how we tried launching like a news show for the middle school after our media class kind of got our hands on this stuff,
Mhm.
and then they let us do some segments, and they pulled our privileges pretty quick because
Oh no.
I think it was probably like I don't know if it was my fault. Um, I think I was interviewing people about what they thought about Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I think one of the kids was like, "Oh, it's dumb," or "Oh, they said like crap," or they said I don't know. That was not. It wasn't even like a big cuss word, but they kind of talked negatively about it and said a word that the school wasn't happy with, and they said you can't do the new show anymore.
Oh no.
So I hope you sounds like you probably had your stuff together a little bit better with more practices in place that you knew what you were doing. We did
Yeah,
we
I
we
mean,
did
I mean,
not.
obviously there was some level of censorship to like what we could say or do because obviously it's school. Speaking of editing, excuse me. Um, I think most of us, even though we had the class for editing, most of us were self taught with editing. At some point, there was a student who would teach and pass on their skills editing on Adobe Premiere, Final Cut, Movie Maker, when it still existed then, and iMovie. I mostly use Premiere. Prior to working in the broadcast class, I did Sony Vegas, self taught on that because I was trying to make those video game videos. So, um, yeah, we had quite a bit of different like video editing resources and people to teach who could pass on their skills at the time. So that was really nice because it didn't come from the teachers; it came from the seniors. So,
Okay, so it sounds, and then you were able to just to practice some narrative stuff
hmm
at the same time too,
yeah.
which is very cool. Nice. Okay, so then I guess jumping to the editing side and dipping your toes in that space because you were trying to work your way towards narrative editing for features and TV, probably, I'm gonna assume. I don't know. Um, What's the workflow like for like you say it wasn't for you and it wasn't quite what you're looking for?
It was
Yeah.
more like I wanted to get into film editing for narrative. I just never got there. I mostly fell into editing like dance videos, music videos, marketing videos. I did like motion graphics design for a little bit, you know. It's like that's the realm that I fell in, or like YouTube blogs, for example. And like I personally feel like I am great at those things, but passionately I want to go the
Yeah.
other way. So that's why I made the switch to set life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like what is editing? When you I'm assuming it's kind of like what's the word that working like mobile work, like you're not really with the team. You kind of just receive a bunch of footage and then like I'm trying to imagine a vlog, like vlog that's kind of almost like docu style, right? You just
Yeah.
get like a
Yeah, yeah,
dump
it's
of
very
like
much like unscripted work.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's like here's my day. Can you make a video about it?
Pretty much, yeah.
It's like okay, I'll try to make this interesting and throw some music on it
Hmm.
and yeah,
It
okay.
was good fun though while it lasted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Cool. All right, first AD. Let's talk a little bit about, from your perspective, because you have experience as a first AD, you have experience in other roles in the production department underneath other first ADs too. So, and I guess I should mention too, uh, the other exciting thing about having you on the show is that, like, I'm on set, I'm on a bunch of, I don't know, I'll call it, I hear your name on set quite often, actually. I'm like, I'll hear just the name Michi.
All good things, I
All
hope.
good things. All good things. But people would just be talking at lunch or something and like your name will come up somehow. And I'll be like, hey, I know Michi. And you're like, you know Michi? And we know Michi. You know Michi? And like everybody seems to know you and everybody has great things to say when you come up. Um,
Oh, that's so
which
nice.
is yeah. So being that you're here now, um, curious to hear about what your take is on you said a little bit before, but what makes a good first AD, and then maybe some things that like what makes maybe not what are some traits that aren't bad first AD, good
Sure,
and bad.
sure. No, no, that's a good question. Um, I'm gonna start with the second question.
The
Is that
bad,
okay?
the bad,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. Um, so traditionally, a lot of people used to view first ADs as like the bossy bitch on set. Pardon my French again. Um, and they were often seen as like the screamers, the angry people, the ones who were always stressed out. And it comes from like a drop of truth, you know? They were mostly from that realm. Um, and assistant directors also have the highest suicide rate in the film industry because it's such a stressful job. You know, like I said, we are a information hub. We are expected to have all the answers, and anything related to safety or like production logistics, even though the producer has their name at the Oscars, you know, it's not the ADs that get the Oscars, the producers get the Oscars for all the logistical stuff. um, all of that stress falls down to the AD at the end of the day. So that's where a lot of the stress and anger may come from. um, so that is like the negative aspect of jumping into aiding, is realizing first and foremost that it is a stressful job. You have to learn how to manage your stress and your temper. Um, and not everybody will like you. Um, but that also comes down how you carry yourself, how you communicate with other people. So most bad assistant directors that I see don't know how to manage that stress. They don't know how to communicate with people that helps them understand how we feel and helps ourselves understand how those other departments feel. A good example that I also give for like bad directors and producers are those who just don't understand how much time certain departments need. What are the needs of these departments realistically? Um, that they need time wise or resource wise, you know? And if they don't understand those resources and time needs, then they get angry and they out of like misunderstanding or lack of understanding. Another thing is that they just don't know how to manage their time, despite the fact that we are supposed to be timekeepers. Um, they're like, oh, how long does this take? 15 minutes. Get it done in 5. Well, I mean, now you're going to get angry because they won't get it done in 5 because realistically, they can't get it done in 5. So, those are things that I see in certain assistant directors, among other department heads, that make them like not so great at their jobs. But that can be catered by realizing that we are problem solvers. We don't have to say no all the time. We just say, I don't know. That's an acceptable answer. And then we follow it up by saying, let me help you find that answer, though. That's what makes a really great assistant director, producer, director on set, is being able to problem solve. We are all collaborators and we are all problem solvers. So as long as we go out of our way to educate ourselves about the different rules, guidelines, needs, realistic time constraints of like whatever the production needs and department heads need, that'll help calm our mind a lot more, and also have the ability to think of different avenues of answers to give to people. Like not necessarily like bullshitting an answer. Like it's just like, oh, this doesn't really work. But what about these 3 options, you know? Oh, I don't have a red shirt for you, but we have maroon, orange, and blah, blah, blah. And in this store also sells a red shirt. Let's see what we can do to get you what you need, you know? Stuff like that. Um, this basically leads into what makes a good assistant director is, you know, good education and research, better way of communicating with people that is respectful and calm. Um, that's where a lot of my communication comes from. But also don't forget that you are the assistant director. So you have to be assertive and make yourself present. Um, this especially applies to people who are smaller stature, female, minority, because oftentimes you'll deal with people who are taller, bigger, a little stronger personality, who you have to counter with. You're not necessarily overpowering them, but show them that you are there, you are here to help, and I am, you know, I am the boss. I am the assistant director. I'm here managing the team.
Yes. Yes.
I know, a long, lengthy
No,
answer.
it's great. No, I guess I'm thinking about like how, yeah, because I have experience first aiding too, and I'm on the, I guess the question, I have a question I'm going to lead into. I'll first say that I'm a quiet person. So when it feels similar to like what you're saying is there's a stereotypical first AD that people have in their brains they expect to see. And sometimes when people come in with a different, quieter space, they're like, wait a second, what's this? um, so I know it's like a thing to overcome, similar to like what you were saying about stature and everything else. I guess okay. I'll ask, where does the where does the yelling first AD fit into good first aiding? Like, because how do you approach it? Because set is the bigger the set, kind of the more things that are going on, and there's a lot to manage. And actually, sometimes the smaller the set, it's everybody's trying to be in a space all at the same time. You have art department dressing here, you've got camera, you've got the grips and the dolly team laying out their track, and you've got all this stuff going on, and you've got everybody's talking, and it's a tiny room, and it's so loud. How do you approach the noise? The How do you communicate in that kind of space, or how do you manage that?
Sure. Um, Fortunate for me, I have like a naturally not like loud voice, but I'm able to project my voice really well. Um, and there's a difference between projecting your voice versus like yelling and screaming at people. I mean, that doesn't mean I haven't like done it like once when like things just got way too loud and a little rambunctious. Um, I think this is where my experience from working in school clubs kind of helps a lot. where we've had to manage like a large body of students and get them to be quiet for stuff. So I've definitely used some techniques from working in those clubs, like if you can hear me once, you can hear me twice, but mostly I use those for kids. We're all full grown adults, hopefully. um, so I treat them like full grown adults, um, with a little bit of like play in the middle. um, I think the yelling, like I said, as long as it's like more projecting. I have had a couple quieter first ads. Like even my last show I worked on, my first ad was a little bit quieter, but he mostly spoke through what we call the voice of God on set. And on union sets, you'll get a lot of these like little speaker systems just like this, with a speaker somewhere like in the set where everybody can hear it, and he'll speak through it, and it's like a modern day megaphone. So there are ways to cater to those who have quieter voices to speak on set to everybody else. Um, at the end of the day, I think it really comes down to your tone. As long as your tone, even though you're a quiet person, um, has some sort of assertiveness at some point during the day, people will listen to you. Um, if you're nice. It's hard as an assistant. You have to be nice to everybody, but also you have to be like assertive. So it's like a weird like balance you have to like figure out. And fortunately, I think I've kind of figured out my balance, but it's a tricky game to play because you have to feel out the personality of the set.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah, be nice, but you have to, there are consequences, but like I am telling you, like you're trying to be as honest as possible, right? Like
Yeah.
you're like, we have this much time.
Yeah,
We're
I always like try to like let them know. My strategy with some directors is if they're a little softer and newer, I do handhold them a lot more. Each shot has a certain time restraint, blah, blah, blah. But if I know they're a little bit more experienced, I go, you got an hour. Do what you will with that hour, but I'm going to come back closer to an hour and say, hey, you got less than an hour. We got to move on. But I will also give you those options. Like, so if you want to keep going, like, we're going to have to cut down some time on this end. But I know that both of these are important to you. Let me have a conversation with the producer to see what we can do on the tail end. Like stuff like that. You always want to work with your director, but also be like, no, we got to move on. Like, there's just not enough time. Again, my voice is like still calm, but I'm not like, mean about it. So,
Yeah, it almost feels similar to script supervising in the way of like, as a script supervisor, the job is almost just to like, as long as you speak up and you voice that, okay, there's a continuity issue with this or this. As long as I voice that that's a thing, then you leave it up to the other people to decide, or is it worth going for another take
yeah.
to correct that she should have grabbed it with her right hand and not her left hand, and also her hair was in front of her ears instead of behind her ears. And then they get to make the call and like, no, it's fine.
Exactly.
We'll do that. Same as someone was the first AD is like,
Yeah.
it's not our movie.
Yeah, people don't realize that a lot of these decisions, at the end of the day, it's the director, you know? Like the director's vision, obviously creatively, but logistically, if we're running low on time, it's partially because of the director. Because I can show you all the times, I can manage the time for you, but if the director is being resistant to that time and the options that I provide them, then we're not working as a team. It's no longer a collaborative process from the creative and the logistical end. So at the end of the day, if the schedule is running behind, yes, you could put the blame on the assistant director, but you could also put the blame on the director as well as the director of photography. We're all one big team. It's all our job. So
Yeah. How do you this feels like a basic communication establishing trust thing, but how do you there's this thing that happens sometimes on set where as a first AD you go up to anybody, you can go up to any department. You can go to makeup, you can go to camera. How much time do you need for this? And they'll give you a time, and then you come back at that amount of time and they're not done yet. Like, how do you is whose fault is that? Because I don't know. I feel like, I don't know. People do this thing where I feel like my diagnosis, let me know if this is accurate, is that people want to please the AD by giving them a time the AD is going to be happy with so the AD can walk away and let them do their thing. But if they say, oh, this is in their head, they're like, I need 20 minutes for this, but I'm going to say 15 because it sounds better. And then they just, like, I'll deal with this later. Or I don't know what goes through people's, how do you, how do you fix that?
Sure, sure. Um, yeah, I have noticed over time, especially within the last recent years, is that asking for time is kind of like haggling. You're in a market, you're like $10, you're like five, $8. And asking for time is kind of the same way. So, in terms of gauging time, from my experience, it's like looking at a chart with experience versus time. You know, most of the time, when someone has less experience, they're gonna need more time. They're gonna tell me 10. Like, here's my best example: a what do you call those? A gimbal, for example, like a Movi gimbal. Camera team on a non-experienced crew will always be like, yeah, 20 minutes. We'll get it up in 20, and I'll be like, you're gonna get it up in at least 45, and if you're really green, 2 hours. And most of the time, I put my clock up, and they're still finagling. They're still finagling. A really experienced assistant camera would get that up in like 10 to 20 minutes, but on average 45. Like even steady cams, because they need the time to calibrate everything, balance everything. Every new lens is another 5-minute balance, and that comes down to experience of working with those departments and averaging out between experience and non-experience to see how that time gauges. Now, when you're moving from union and non-union, experience or non-experience, people are gonna ask for more time regardless. You know, and you will run into people who will just give you I'll give you a lie, like, oh, like it'll be done in 15. But they actually need more time. They just get scared to tell you. I've dealt with that for sure. And that also just comes down to communicating with them and building some sense of trust with them. Um, I always try to push for realistic times. I Mostly because it works out in our favor when we work for realistic times. Once I get those realistic times, then I'll start pushing down and be like, hey, so ladies, for example, take 45 minutes average non-glam makeup for hair and makeup on a non-union set. For union, they do 45 minutes hair, 45 minutes makeup. But from my experience working on so many indie shoots, we can squeeze it down to 45 minutes hair and makeup together. Now, when someone tries to squeeze that under 30 minutes, then I start questioning that. Um, and then anything over like an hour, then I'm like, like, what are you doing to that person that requires more than an hour? So I think to really fight those battles with time, it kind of comes with experience, with just experiencing how long all of these departments really take. And it's also part of the reason why I took a break from ADing when I first started, to explore other departments. Like I had friends train me in working as a second AC, doing like G&E swing for a little bit, and seeing how long certain lights take to set up. So then when I AD, nobody comes up to me and goes, oh, it's going to take like 45 minutes to set up. I'm like, what are you setting up? Oh, just like this T-bone over here. I'll be like, that's going to take like 15 minutes. You just like boom, boom, and done. So really just experience. And then after a while, when you like know how long certain things take, just tell them. Most of the time they tell me 20. I just tell them, all right, 20 minutes on the clock, don't bother to come back in 20. Hey, you told me 20 minutes. How much more time do you need? You keep them accountable. You told me 20 minutes, and then I come back, it's like, hey, so here's another 10 minutes I gave you. So, and then at the end of the day, so in today, you took a total of 30 minutes. So how long are you going to take with this person tomorrow? Do you still need a 30, or do you think you can get it done 15? So keeping people accountable.
Yep. It's a lot of work.
It's all about communication, about how you communicate, what you communicate, and also, You always have to stay on your toes with time. You let your guard down for a second, and all of a sudden, like 2 hours pass by.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like the correct answer. I like it. I just, it's just a lot of work. It's just a lot of work. I feel for it. Yeah, I mean, I enjoy. Okay, yeah, I'm thinking about as a script supervisor, I enjoy being buddy buddy with the first AD because I do have that first AD experience too, and I don't have to. The stress isn't on my shoulders, so I'm like,
I feel that. Sometimes I feel so happy when I'm in a script supervising chair. I'm like, I could have chose this life. I could have chose the happy life where I just focus on creatives, be the director's best friend. I just tell people, oh, the cup's actually this way, not this way. And people are like, what? But I chose ADing, which is like a little bit more of a thankless job compared to script supervising.
yeah, they both have thankless aspects to them for sure, but
Mhm.
the one takes a lot more specific outward energy. Script soup, you got to be internal a lot. Um, but yes, okay, great, good first ADs. Let me see what. All right, what I want to jump into is you have um on your Instagram you have been pretty good about posting like little reels and videos, kind of little snippets from set, and even some little memes here and there. Essentially, I'm gonna list off a couple and kind of
Sure.
get the larger picture behind the why and slash explaining it for people that are less familiar with why it's funny. I think I don't know. This one feels recent. It might have been just in the last day or two. Even you can let me know. But the video is of you in a trailer, and the text on the screen, like you're kind of hopping around with a certain face, and it says, "We have to push this scene onto a sixth day." So, what does that mean, and why the face?
This is a funny video when I think about it. So the meme is basically there is a TikTok, Instagram meme where I think it's Peter Griffin. He's like saying "whoa," and it's just repeatedly him saying "whoa," and you just see the body like go like jump cutting from here to here to here to here, and basically they're just like leaving the situation. And that's kind of what I did in the AD trailer on one of our like less busy days. And the caption, like he said, says, when the scene gets pushed onto a sixth day. Most of the time, any crew member, and I'm sure like anyone working a 9 to 5, would only like to work a 5 day work week. And so we are promised, let's say, on Monday through Friday, you're like, okay, awesome, I get weekends off. And so when we have like scenes that are scheduled to each day and you're like, oh no, we're running out of time, we got to push this scene to a shoot day, but there's like, we can't push it to any day later than our last day of shooting. So we got to add a day in the middle of the schedule, which is one of your off days, hence the sixth day. And so you're just like, no, I'm good. I love movie making, but there are like sometimes we have to put your foot down with like mental health and stuff, and I think I've been doing a lot better with like um, saying no to certain things and taking those hiatuses and stuff. Obviously, like during certain periods of times in a year, you're just like, I could use the money. So, but yeah, that's the joke behind it is like, oh, sixth day, I'm okay, thanks.
Yeah, I'd rather have the day off, right? That's
Yeah,
the
it's a lot harder to say no when you're an AD though. As a PA, it's great.
yeah. Well, yeah. How? Yeah, we just let's just make our days, okay? Let's just make our days. Next clip. Speaking of fun, making. Oh, what does it say? Making movies is fun. You had a little kind of like I know I was scrolling through and you have snippets. You kind of did a compilation snippet video with people just kind of having fun on set, being wacky.
Mm-mm-mm.
And I think just on the quote it said making movies is fun. And then showing some fun moments. So, because you kind of just said it there is like what I guess what is how do you see because the AD position, let's just say specifically, is kind of like not a fun. It's not like you're not there to tell people, hey, all right, everybody, make sure you're having fun, okay? And like the
Mm-hmm.
job is, let's make sure we're
Yeah.
on time,
Sure.
which is the opposite of fun.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. Everything that I've explaining so far hasn't indicated that people are having fun, but I think I found a way to communicate with people where I'm able to loosen up after a while and still interact with people in like a sassy way, but also make sure that I bring people onto my team who are able to cater to a, um, for the lack of a better vocab word, fun environment. And I do joke around a lot with people on set when I do assistant direct, especially after like day 10 or something. Um, and I found that humor and my sassiness kind of helps loosen that up for sure. Because it also helps with my assertiveness, with my sassiness. I try to make sure it doesn't veer onto passive aggressiveness, of course. So, um, yeah, I think for the most part, as long as you bring on people who kind of cater to that type of personality, who are able to do their job, but also loosen up when needed on downtime. But as soon as they say rolling or it's like, oh, need this, you're like, switch it to the other side, like, oh God, we got to do our job. And then like downtime, okay, let's just relax for a second and like chat, have fun. We're all friends. We're having a good time. It's like, all right, what time is it? All right, we got to go. Let's go. So, yeah, stuff like that. It's like you have like this on off switch that you develop over time.
Because it doesn't, for me, let me know if this resonates, but I don't almost feel like there's no off switch. Like it feels more like it's a dimmer switch.
Oh yeah, okay, I feel that. Yeah,
and you can never go fully off because the ears have to be listening for
yeah.
stuff.
My work mode is always on. My play mode is like dependent on the time.
Dependent on the time.
Yeah. Like if it's like a really stressful time, then I'm like, this is not a good time right now, guys. Like we'll have fun later. Like, or like, let's say safety wise, somebody brings a skateboard. They're like fooling around skateboarding. I'll be serious, but I'll make it fun still and be like, hey, no skateboarding on my time. Go skateboard on your own time. Get out of here. Like stuff like that. I'm fooling around still, but I'm also putting my foot down on safety. So it's like the wording and the tone in which I like speak with people, with that kind of stuff.
Yes. So what is the role, again, from the AD perspective here? How does fun fit in to still, like, how does that balance happen, and how I guess I'm asking too because I have a hard time navigating it on like how to know when it's time to work and when it's time for fun. How because everybody's got to kind of try to squeeze that fun in, to have the whole set have that same vibe and feel. But how do we know when to have fun and when to? And it's kind of like a weird, vague question, but
Yeah. Let me think about that for a second.
because the way that I initially think about it is like in the reference of time is okay, we're on schedule and everybody's been consistent with making their times. We kind of know what we're going to get and when, so it offers that flexibility to kind of drop the guard a little bit. But I don't know. Maybe it's a bad question.
Um, it's not about necessarily, mainly because like I've noticed there's a trend in my interviews as an AD where production or whoever's hiring me at the time would ask me how I would present myself as an AD, and the word fun is also dropped into those interviews, because they don't want a screamer. They also don't want to hear that you're not a screamer because apparently that's a trend now, is ADs saying that they're not a screamer anymore because of the trend of weeding out ADs as screamers.
So you're saying that I am not a screamer is a red flag?
Well, it's not like a red flag. I think it's like it's not one that I would recommend saying in your interviews anymore.
Yeah,
Because one of my friends told me before I was about to interview for a different production that was one statement I needed to avoid because the HR people at the time just kept hearing it over and over again with every AD that they interviewed. I'm not a screamer. I'm not a screamer. I'm not a screamer, you know? And like, it's true, you know, for the most part, but I think we're all still finding ways to describe how we do our job while seeming like a manager that is fun and respectable. You know, it's weird. You know, I totally get your question and why it's like weird to balance between that. Um, and yes, like I said, I am 100% work on most of the time. I'm like listening, but I'm like constantly like hearing on my walkie, trying to hear what's happening here. Because if I miss what they're saying for a second, then I get in trouble. Um, there's no real answer I can really give to you for that. Um, it's really production dependent, and why it's so important to figure out how to navigate through different people's personalities.
Yeah.
And then once you figure out the positive ways to interact with people, then you could drop statements to people um, that you sprinkle throughout the day that keep the set light, you know?
Yeah, and I think you kind of offered a nice thing there. We're talking about the team that you bring on is helpful to establishing the. Because if you have the team that you know can offer this hard to describe element to your set,
Yeah.
you're like, all right, great. These people can do the job, but they can also have fun.
Yeah.
So it's nice to at least know that you're bringing a foundational space that can
Mm-hmm.
help set a tone for
Yeah,
like,
because like you know, ADing is very stressful. Like especially the higher position you go, the more we have to manage. Um, so those people around you can help alleviate that stress from you, and also provide you a space to vent when needed. And I tell this to a lot of my PAs and AD friends as well too. Like, don't be afraid to just step away for a second and just go breathe, go cry in a corner if you need to, or like just vent. You know, this is you know, our team is here to support each other for that reason. So we can still enjoy the movie making process together.
lovely. That sounds
Yeah.
lovely. Question on building your team.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming if you're not the first is the first AD the one building like in your experience, are you trying to bring on people like does it matter what position in the production hierarchy you are, or is it first AD that is typically the one building their team, or is producers offering throwing people in there too?
It
And
varies. Usually I like choosing my own second AD. Um, and then sometimes I choose my own second. Uh, for PA wise, it's kind of a team effort. Um, on union sets, I notice it comes from mostly the second AD and second, and anyone else, they're more like auxiliary picks from the first AD, UPM, executives, kid, or something like that for must hires. It's true, it happens.
sure, sure. We got to get them experience
um,
on set.
yeah, usually from an indie perspective, I typically try my best to hire people that I know or that other people that I know. Um, and then on bigger sets, I think it mostly comes from UPM down. But I'm still kind of exploring that realm. So there are various answers to that. For me, mostly on independent, it's me hiring my team.
Okay. So it's all right, Michi. You're hired as our first AD. We have a second. We have some days we can bring on a second, and then our base level is I don't know what 2 PAs, 3 PAs. Who knows what the size of the production is if you're talking
Before though,
indie.
I would ask what the budget is.
All right. That's, yeah. How do you yeah? What can you yeah? What the where does the sizings change? What are the budget parameters and the team sizes? How do you see that?
Sure. Nowadays, I never do a production without a second AD. I always try to push even short films for a second AD. Um, it's just so much easier because even though the second AD is doing multiple jobs, they can at least step away from set I can't step away from set, period. So, but once I hit modified low budget, um, I have to have a second, period. Modified low budget is 250,000 to 750,000 question mark. Even low budget, I prefer to have a second, but it's like tricky ground. So at least second AD, and then modified low budget, I always try to fight for first, second, and second. Um, and then from low budget on, obviously you kind of have like the majority of your team. Um, Once you get on like tier one, tier two, you're gonna have like a base camp AD or base camp PA. Everyone starts having like their specific roles. First team PA, walkie PA, like people who could be ADs, but you throw it into a PA position.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I'm trying to think about maybe the smaller scale side of that, where everybody's kind of more of a general set PA, in your second. How do you? Because like you said, you want to hire people that you already know,
Mm-hmm.
or hire people that you know, people that the recommendations from people that you know and trust. Um, So if the people are, let's say they're watching right now and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to PA for Michi, or I want to get on set and kind of see your style or whatever. How does have someone even kind of, is there a possibility to get on this radar, or how
Um,
does?
yeah, I think so. If you're like really green, like you've never been on a film set, my recommendation is film school short films. Those are the best places to start because at least you get to dabble in all those schools. Most film schools are pretty much the same. The difference is that certain schools have higher budgets to provide to their students and more resources. Like I went to Cal State Long Beach, for example. The students there are just as capable as students at USC. The difference is that we just didn't have that much money. USC has like 2 floors of equipment rooms, like 5 bajillion like sound stages. We just had 2 or 3 small ones that were like converted from classrooms. Um, the only film school that I would say to avoid would be New York Film Academy. I've never had good
Ooh,
experiences from that, and very unsafe conditions from not only my experience but friends' experience as well too, and people who just didn't were they just didn't know like the basics of like working on set compared to like Chapman, USC, Loyola, Biola, Cal State Long Beach, and all the other film programs. I don't know what's going on there, but aside from that, I would try to find your way onto um, a film school short film set because those are the most forgiving. They're all students, they're all learning together. However, once you get a little bit more experience and you want to try out a union set, um, there are green people who work on union sets, but just take into account that those PAs are expected to know more. They're expected to know how to do background paperwork. They're expected to know how to run cast through the works after they come back from base camp. Know how to run walkies, which is not that hard to do. Like it's very teachable, but they just already know how the set works. So it helps to have at least some sort of basic PA experience. Um, but the other thing too is that people you bring on to a set, this applies to any position in the film industry. Any person you bring on that is your recommendation or your hire or your friend's hire, like that's on you. That's on your friend, you know? Because if they do something that's not uh in good light, like they're not great at their job, then that's on you. If they're like not experienced, that's one thing. If they're teachable and moldable, great, awesome. Like you know, they're a fantastic type of hire to have. Good attitude, good initiative, fast learner. But if they just like are solid and they just won't move, they clearly aren't picking up the skills that we are giving them by week 2, or they just have a bad attitude, then that's a reflection of you as the person who hired them. So that's why it's hard sometimes to hire newer people who you've never met before and don't even have a referral for either.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's hard giving referrals too, because it's like, all right, well, I know it speaks on, I know it's going to reflect on me. I could take a credibility hit if
Mm-hmm.
this person doesn't perform. So
Yeah.
yeah, which is why referrals are helpful because
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, if Mishi's going to recommend this person, I have good faith that they're going to be able to
Yeah.
do the job.
Yeah. A
Um,
lot of the film industry is word of mouth. Like the reason why you don't see a lot of job postings online when you first start out is because most jobs are word of mouth or they already know you. You know, a producer who I've worked with like 10 bajillion times will come back to me and say, hey, we got this job that's coming up. Or like how certain actors will just be quote unquote given roles because they were already considered for it or they already have the connection to somebody. You know, they don't have to go look on those open casting call sites.
Mhm.
Um, so most of my jobs nowadays are word of mouth.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Let me look at my list here really quick. We're looking good on time. I want to do a. I don't know. Let's talk about because you mentioned it a little bit. Yeah, let's talk about these two things. This is kind of. This one seems a little bit more interesting. I'll jump into this. This is called, and this lays into the videos you put on your Instagram too. You put a little like time lapse or some sort of edit of script breakdown
Mm-hmm.
as an AD in prep for in prep for you doing your job in pre-production. So A, what is breaking down a script? And B, what have you learned about your process? Like how has your process developed and what are you looking for? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about scheduling hacks and places where what you look for when you're
Sure,
reading.
sure. Um, so in filmmaking, most of the time when most of us start a job, we are given a script, either a short film, TV, what have you, feature film. Let's take a short film, for example. So a short film, I'll be given a 16-page script. I will print it out first because I'm old school like that. It's just a lot easier sometimes when you have a physical item in front of you to read. Um, Most people they were printed out just like full page, but I like having two sheets per page because saving money and
And
saving
like
paper and all
sides, you're
that. Yeah,
printing
kind
your
of
own
like sides.
sides.
Yeah. When you break down a script, my first read through, if I have time, I will read through the script by itself, no notes, analyzing it. That way, I can just get like a good sense of the script. But if I don't have time, then I usually combine this with my second step. I'll during the second step, I'll read through it scene by scene, and then I will draw a straight line in between each scene. So scene one, straight line, bottom of scene one, straight line. This indicates that there is a next scene too. Then I start notating what story day it is in the script, similar to like scripts you're revising. So I notate what story day that scene is. I notate um, each and every element in that scene. What characters are in that scene? What stunts are in that scene? What background players are playing? The props, the wardrobe, and each of those elements that I read in the scene, I highlight with a color. So on my table, I will have a rainbow of highlighters, and it'll be like red is for speaking role, green is for atmosphere, orange is for stunts or special action, purple for props, set deck, etc., etc. And you will just like see my script breakdown after a while when you look through the whole script, just be covered in lines, notations of story days, colors of elements. And in red, I'll write questions to the director like how many background were they expecting? How did they expect to shoot this scene? Is this gunfire VFX or practical effects with squibs, etc.? And I will, if I haven't met the director yet, I will take that breakdown and then run through my notes with the director and then discuss their vision and any questions I had story wise or logistics wise in the initial meeting. And then after that, I make like a preliminary schedule. So I will take that whole physical breakdown and I start going digital. I'll open up a program for free, it's Synchronize. If you want to pay, it's Movie Magic Scheduling, both from the same company. Um, So Movie Magic Scheduling, I'll open up like this breakdown that basically digitizes everything that you just did. So cast, okay, in this scene 1, this is interior, snowy bog, nighttime. This is 3/8 of a page. And then synopsis, and you put in all those elements digitally, and those will create strips. And slowly over time, you will get like 16 different strips for 16 different scenes. And if I click each of those strips, it'll tell me all the elements related to that scene. Once I like do the full breakdown, that's when the scheduling starts. So the next step, I start moving around those strips to organize them into shoot days. And the most efficient way to organize the strips is by location and by time of day. So I keep all the hospital stuff together. I keep all of Wyatt's house together, all pool stuff together. And then after that, I start indicating how many days these locations will take based on the length of time it'll shoot a dialogue scene or a stunt scene, etc. Um, and also, is it daylight dependent? Are the windows like big? Can we like what we call day for night it, which is faking day as nighttime, etc. Stuff like that. Or do we have to like stick with the real time of day because the sun moves?
Or
Yeah.
budget
Or budget,
location
exactly. Yeah.
constraints or
Yeah, even the short film that I just broke down yesterday, I asked them like, so is this a 2-day or 3-day thing? Because we could make it a 3-day thing, because your one hotel scene right now is like 9 some pages, and that's a lot. Anything like over like 4 to 5 pages per day is a lot. Not that it doesn't happen. You can probably make it up to like 18. I've seen 15. Don't do it though. And I was like, 9 pages is a lot. Can we do 2 days of shooting to separate these 9 pages into 4 pages, 5 pages each day, just so you can let your dialogue scene breathe. And that's when you have the conversation with your director and your producer. Go, hey, so if you really want your performance to be good, you don't want to push them too hard. This is what we can do to schedule this way. So that's when our next conversation will happen. I'll drop that schedule or options of schedules and be like, this is what options that we can probably work with. Now let me know your restrictions. Actor restrictions, location restrictions, budget restrictions. We can only shoot in 25 days, or this actor can only work Monday through Fridays, or they have to fly out by May 15 because they have to go work on the rookie or something like that. Or locations like, oh, you can only work weekends. So your first initial schedule will never be the schedule. It'll always move around.
Oh my word. Oh my word. Well, now you know how to schedule a movie, everybody.
Yeah.
It's just no, it's okay. Story days. Let's clarify story days for people
Sure.
because I can that's because there's a difference between like when you build the schedule, there's the days that you shoot the schedule. That's our reality, and then there's a reality within the story. Because stories jump around. You watch a movie, they're awake on one day, and then the next week happens, and the next week happens. So it's important to clarify because you might have the 3 hospital scenes on the same day.
But they all might be 3 different story days.
Yeah.
Or
It's
there's
like,
a flashback.
yeah, they went back to the hospital 3 different times in the movie, and once they were in a cast, and once they're out of the cast, and blah blah blah. So story day, story night. Okay, great. Then I'm trying to think about too, because like of course you have way more first AD experience than I do, so I'm thinking about like my own experiences because I don't recall us talking about it, but I first AD'd a feature to end last year, and they were the ones like I don't know, they were the ones who decided like the producers figured out ahead of time. They're like they did the breakdown on their side because of course they had limited budget, so they're like we
Right.
only have
I've had that happen.
yeah, we're like we only have 2 weeks of pre for you, so we did the breakdown. Um, and these are how many days we have budget to shoot for. Like they did all the math on they did their line producing and figured out their days. So I was like, all right, we just got to squeeze this in this many days. But do you find that there is flexibility as a first AD to push back on these decisions and stuff?
I
Yeah.
do. Yeah. If it's the producer's initial breakdown, then yes. Yeah, I can come in and be like, okay, I will work with the number of shoot days that you have budgeted already. It's already set in stone. There's nothing you can do about that to an extent. Um, but then I can step in and be like, hey, I noticed that you scheduled this way. However, I don't think that's going to work, and I think we need to split it this way. Like, so
Right.
there's room for conversation with that kind of stuff, and you have to come in with like a sense of confidence and pull from your past experiences for that. And as long as the producer trusts you, then I think it should work out. The difference is when you step in to a production, like mid production or like a percentage amount into the production, and you're working with another assistant director schedule. That's when it starts getting really tricky. Nowadays, I try not to do that too much because now you're living with what I call the consequences of the decisions made from that schedule. I don't call them like mistakes necessarily, but now you're living with the consequences, positive or negative, of the decisions that were made before you stepped in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in my scenario, to clarify, yeah, they'd had their breakdown, they had their schedule, and they're like, all right, this is the foundation, but we trust you to
Mm-hmm.
optimize
Yeah,
this and all
yeah.
that
Because
stuff.
at
Yeah.
that point, usually when the producer makes a breakdown, you haven't shot anything yet, you know,
Yeah,
and
it's way early.
you're still in prep work. So that makes it a lot easier. Even if it's only like 3 weeks of prep or even a couple of days of prep, you're just like, okay, well, at least we haven't shot anything yet.
Yeah.
There's still room to improve. But when you've already shot and you're taking over someone else's schedule, then you're like, all right.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about more like, hey, we have 23 days, and here's a prelim that we broke down, and you're looking at it, and then I take it, read the script, do all my own stuff, shuffle it around, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, well, we still have some crazy days that have stunts and 100 background, and it's 10 pages on the day, and
Yeah.
I'm like, this.
That's when you start compromising with them. Like if you feel like you're in an absolute squeeze in the schedule, then you could probably bring it up. Be like, hey, like either you guys have to add one more shoot day, or you have to expect that one of these days is going to go into overtime. Like, which one are you willing to pay? The overtime or the extra shoot day? And on top of that, depending on what day it falls in a week, and this is where like shuffling out around a schedule can get a little stressful. If you start veering into overtime, then it starts messing into turnarounds. There's something called 10-hour turnarounds in California, and you need to make sure that people are well rested. For SAG, it's a 12-hour turnaround, and you're going to have to deal with forced calls for that, and that's more money for the production. So it's like you change one thing, and all of a sudden, like, oh, the whole puzzle is kind of messed up. You got to like shift everything all around again. So
Yeah, it's no good.
yeah, so it's good to catch those things really early on and develop a relationship with the producer where you can be upfront with them about it. Producers are one of the people on set where you can be a little bit more abrasive with, you know, because even though they're the ones that hired you, at the end of the day, if we just didn't have enough money, that's technically on them. They can't put that blame on you. Oh, we're just not budgeted enough for this. I don't know. Like, in my perspective, if you just didn't have enough money for so much that you're asking for, like maybe you should have raised a little bit more money beforehand. Like, that's just me. But I also want to help you out as much as possible. Let's see what we can do. Indie filmmaking is like magical in a way where we are able to find creative solutions to the smallest budget, but we also don't want to overexploit it. It's
Yeah,
yeah,
it's a balance.
yeah.
Cause yeah, yeah, it does fall. We as a first me putting my first AD hat on. Yeah, we are kind of the ones that can speak up to producers. It's I don't know. The director can do it. We can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe DPs can probably do it too. I don't know.
Yeah,
But it's
because
not like
people do come to us to go talk to producers about stuff.
yeah.
So we have to be a little bit more upfront and abrasive with that kind of stuff. The other thing too with producers is that when I get interviewed for jobs, oftentimes they think they're only interviewing me and I'm the one being interviewed. But the way that I ask my questions, I'm also interviewing them, especially for indies, because you can never know That's how I've been able to avoid really badly managed productions nowadays, is interviewing them back, asking them about like the budget and stuff, like what kind of stuff have they worked on. Obviously I have to do my own research beforehand too, but like instead of them only asking me questions, I come in with my full on research and questions as well too, to make sure
Yeah.
that they're doing their part.
Do you have examples of these questions off the top of your head?
um
Or maybe like the big two or a big one?
I guess first and foremost, don't ever forget to ask about the budget. I've had AD friends who are a little greener who get scared to ask about money. But if you don't ask about the budget, how will you know what scale production you're working on?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's it's very telling very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then if somebody comes up to me and tells me they are a $2 million project and they are travel and lodging, but they can't give you a second AD, then that's problematic. I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Why can't you give me a second AD? Or they'll be like, well, our producer's kid wants to be, works in production, so we're gonna have them be your second. I'll be like, oh, okay. Well, are you at least gonna let me bring on an experienced second AD? Um, or I gauge their experiences. Like what kind of projects have you worked on, or like what, same thing with director. I asked them like what kind of projects have you worked on, what's your vision. And for the director it's less about um what their experience is, but just what their character is. um
Yeah, are you gonna try? Are we gonna like each other?
yeah, do I match your project? I know you're trying to see if I'm a match for your project, but I'm trying to see if I'm a match for your project. Like, do our personalities match? Or I'm gauging, are you a strong personality? Okay, then I will come into this project with a softer personality, because two strong personalities together are going to be no bueno with each other. Are you a softer, greener director? Then I'm going to come in a little stronger, and balance out you. But if I notice that our personalities in general just don't click, and it happens, it's sad when it happens, but it happens. um, then I realize that I have to step away. I'm just not the right fit for your project, and not everybody is. So
Yeah, it's good to have that confidence that you know, like kind of like what your experience is and what you're willing to put up with and what you're
mhm.
willing not to put up with. Like that's a nice place
Yeah,
to be.
yeah.
How often do you, like you said, there's in those interviews you're talking with a director and you're talking with producers and you're interviewing them as they're interviewing you. How often do you ask for not like maybe like a pseudo crew list for like who's on this project
hmm
outside of just those two? Are you curious
I do
about
that
who else?
sometimes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anybody specific? Like, are you looking for like who's the DP or who's costume designing or
Yeah, I will, if there's somebody who's like within my circle with the film community, especially Asian American, like, because not that all Asians know each other in the film industry, but at some point some names kind of like pop up. You're like, oh, I know that person. Um, yeah, sometimes it'd be like, oh, like, do you already have a DP that you hired already and you're working with? Like, and if they're greener, like, are you happy with them? Just like create like little banter conversation so we can like slowly get to know each other. Um, but other times, yeah, I am kind of seeing who is also attached to the project. Most of the time, I really only care about the producer, the director, maybe the DP when I'm getting hired on. Like all of the positions are just like nice to know. Because at the end of the day, even if I don't know them, if we get along, great. That's another person to add into my network. And when I see them on set again, I'll be like, oh my gosh, it's Eddie.
yeah,
So
hey.
I try not to be close minded when it comes to people's names getting hired.
Yeah. So, but do you ever be like, "Hey, director, nice chatting with you. Is there a chance?" Or like producer, because if the interview is only with the producer, you speak up and like, "I need to talk to the director too."
Mhm. Sometimes I like them as separate meetings. If I want to talk to the director creatively, I prefer if it's
Yeah.
just a director, mainly because it helps us befriend each other better. And also, it gives me a chance to talk about the creative stuff. Because when the producer is there, it's like the logistic element is kind of thrown in. And then the producer the meeting of the producer, I sometimes don't like the director being there because, like I said, the way I talk to directors, not directors, producers is a little different. I kind of coddle my director, and then my producer, I'm like, hey,
Yeah, you get your firm stance
yeah,
for them.
I did the firm hands on hip kind of thing. This is not gonna work. And the director, whatever you want, we're gonna make this work for you. I want to make sure you're
Or
happy.
yeah.
And I'll go to the producer. I'd be like, the director's not happy right now. We need this. And
So you got to get them in separate rooms.
yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like, but I guess, does that happen often for you where you're like, I don't know that DP, can I have a one-on-one with him first too? Is that a scenario?
Say the question again.
Um, is there, how often does it happen to where you're like you said, you want to have a one-on-one with director, one-on-one with producer? Does it ever come up with like, when you ask, do you have a DP on board yet? And they're like, oh, we have this person. And you're like, oh, I don't know that person. Can I hop on a call with them too before
No,
taking a
not
gig?
really.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I think as long as I trust that the director and the DP are doing their due diligence, communicating with each other, then after a while, I'll be like, okay, cool. Like once you guys have like a shot list going, if we're doing a lot of remote prep, for example, then yeah, let's hop on a call. Let's talk about it. And that way I can get to know your DP as well too. But most of the time, no, I don't push too hard to meet the DP straight off the bat. Um, I just kind of let those meetings happen naturally.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. Let's end. Let's wind down talking a little bit about, like, because when we first met, I believe it was on Ashley Aiken's set for the AFI Directing Women's Workshop single. Yeah, and that short went to South by, which is very cool. But I think
Oh,
that
sorry. Yes, it went to South
it
by
went to South
Southwest.
by
Yes.
Southwest. I think that was that our first? I think that was our first set together. I don't even know anymore.
I know we worked on 2 to 3, but a lot of your productions that you worked on, since it was on my feed a lot, kind of mixed into my brain because you had people on your set that I also worked with. So that's why I don't really remember.
No, it's been so long too. That was like 3 years ago or something. It
Yeah.
was pre-pandemic. Um, that was first AD on more of the indie side. I think you were transitioning out of Script Soup at that point. You were kind of still bringing it up on
Yeah,
occasion.
because a lot of USC people at the time kind of knew me as script supervising because I came into USC projects doing script supervising because I did their one of the James Franco features. They called them the James Franco features at the time before he was had that whole ordeal.
Yeah. Uh-huh. That was before that.
Yeah. So I worked on Thomasina Sawyer as script supervisor, and one of the directors on that shoot knew I wanted to do more ADing, so he brought me onto more AD work. So that's when I first AD'd Samir, among other short films that people brought me on at USC. Single being one of the many student short films. Single was with AFI though.
Yeah. AFI Directing
Yeah.
Women Workshop.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then, because of course I follow you on social media and stuff. I don't think we've been on set with each other for a while.
Yeah, not for a while.
But it seems like you've done some pseudo transitioning. Like you've gone from my perspective, in like being a first AD on the more indie stuff into almost more, I can't tell, like a more of a support player on bigger stuff. Like you're making like a,
yeah. I've been
yeah.
balancing between indie productions and studio world, yeah. Mainly because like unlike IATSE is one of the unions like SAG. They're allowed to do union and non-union work. ADs are not.
That's DGA,
Yes.
Directors Guild.
Yes. So on studio sets or even anything above a low budget tier, so like once you start hearing like hitting tier 1, tier 2 budget, which I can't remember the numbers for those, unfortunately.
It's not even that much.
It's like 2 million plus.
There's
like
a tier.
3 million plus.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't work on those as a independent assistant director until I join GGA. So on those projects, I join as support as the ADPA, the production assistant under the assistant director, mainly because I want to be able to network with the people in DGA who are already working on those sets, get a sense of how those sets run. Because when I worked as a indie AD, a lot of people kept telling me, "Oh, indie and studio, like indie and not union, they're all the same." And like, as I've discovered on these union studio sets, they're not. Like the foundational aspect of how ADs work in an indie set is pretty much the same as studio. It's just that the problems are a little bigger. There's more money, there's more departments involved because compared to indie, where all the jobs are squeezed into one, everyone has now their own individual jobs. Like a second AD on a small short film is now split into a base camp AD, a second that's on set, a second that's at base, a first team PA, a walkie PA, a background PA. Background is what I worked on the sympathizer just now. We just wrapped last Friday. And they handle like all of that paperwork and the vouchers and all the logistics regarding that. So there's just a lot more like tiny details that you have to take into account with those things, and I'm glad that I was able to figure out and learn those things from a production assistant position, because as a PA, people are more forgiving to you with mistakes. There's more of a safety net, like compared to had I not done that, working in a supporting role on studio sets. I imagine that if I just transitioned from indie ADing straight into union ADing, I probably would have had such a hard time, um, because of those tiny details. And at that point, there is no net. If I mess up, I mess up. Yeah, and now it's on me.
Okay, yeah. So you're kind of building up those days
Yeah,
to that's the goal is
yeah.
DGA AD work in the union sets.
hmm I'm about 400 days in with my 80 book
Phew,
out of
so
520.
many
I
days.
know. And there's different routes to get into Directors Guild too. So I'm not doing the route that the PAs would on these studio shows, because the studio level PAing, they can submit a 600-day book, but that only gets them to third area, and then they have to upgrade from there. The book that I'm working on is strictly just assistant director days, no PA days included, um, and that one will get me into first area.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right. So that's your current. That's your
that's
current.
my current route. Yeah.
Nice. And then I guess maybe this is. I feel like this is the last question. But how do you feel being on those union sets, observing the like being in the supporting role for the union sets, and you bring up to those people that you have first AD indie experience? Does that how much does that carry over? Like, is that something that matters, or they're like, we don't really
It kind
care?
of does, yeah. Yeah.
So it translates well enough.
I mean, I try not to be like egotistical about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, most of the time they kind of find out that I do, in the hiring process. They'll ask, why are you choosing to be a PA when you already work as an AD? Very valid question, one that I already answered in your last question. But if anything, it helps me bond with these ADs more, because I now come to set with a different level of experience than some of these PAs do. Like, obviously, some of these PAs do AD, but a lot of them that I've met have only done union level PAing. Um, but they've never been thrown in a position where they had to manage a set. So that's like the different experience that I provide, is that
Yeah.
I can come with a different type of support where I'm still supporting them as a PA. I understand where I am in the hierarchy, obviously. I try not to overstep my boundary, but I'm able to gauge things, um, in a way that a PA would not be able to, because I get where the ADs coming from. I know what their needs are. I know what's on their mindset. Hopefully, each
Yeah,
AD
yeah, yeah.
thinks differently.
But you see all the moving parts. You
Yeah,
see
and then they
everything.
also see me as somebody who's also learning. They also still give me the safety net because I'm a PA, and also because I come from indie side. You're like, oh, you came from indie side. Let us teach you what the union side is like. And I play that card. I'm gonna ride that wave.
That's great.
It's good. Because I'm constantly learning, no matter how many years of experience that I get in this. Even when I join union side, I'm gonna be constantly learning. I'm not gonna let anyone get me down for not knowing enough. It just means like there's just more room to grow. So
Awesome. Great. Well, very cool. That's 100 days still to go. All the
hopefully by
best.
October I'll be around 500 because I have like 3 feature films coming up and a short film.
Killing it. Killing it. Nice. Nice. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, and unless I missed anything, I feel like we're there. That's kind of where we're at time. Is there anything I'm missing that you need to say about first AD?
Um, no, not that I can think of. I hope that you can find in your journey to find your voice as an assistant director. But from my understanding, that's not your long-term goal, though.
If anything, I'm trying to avoid doing more first AD work.
Yeah, because you want to be a director, right?
Yeah, directing's the dream. Script supervising is the money maker. And it's much more chill than first ADing. So I enjoyed that chair a lot more.
I do envy directors, I will say, because directors have a different type of vernacular where they just have this vernacular to communicate with different people but what their vision is. And me, I have a vernacular to communicate with different departments too, but like if I were to like dream up something, I would be like I would like pianos. The sound I can't really like describe. It's pianos,
It's
it's hard, you have to figure out your vocabulary to talk to not only your actors but just like your composer, your production designer about exactly what tone and colors and lighting and all that
from
stuff.
production.
So I envy you for that, to taking the step forward into your journey as a director and finding your voice in that realm. So
appreciate it.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, no, it's been fun. It's a lot. Okay, well, I guess before this is, where can people that want to follow you, where's the best place and where can people keep up with all things Michi?
Sure. I update my Instagram the most. That's probably my most up to date. I do technically have a TikTok, but most of it kind of leaks out from whatever comes out of my Instagram. So if you really want updates, Instagram is the way to go. And then if you want to see my professional work, my name is easily Google searchable. My website is literally the same name as my Instagram. You can find my full resume there or find me on IMDb.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, and that's the show.
Thank
Thanks,
you
everybody.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.